Hey everyone, welcome back to another session. Our next guest speaker here is Adrienne Dorison, and she is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Run Like Clockwork. You can see a bunch of books there on the background. I immediately recognized a couple of them. Adrienne, welcome to the summit today. Super excited to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here, and are we ready to get going?
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. So my name is Adrienne. We're going to be talking about how to design a business that runs itself. Our company is called Run Like Clockwork, all about how to remove yourself from the day-to-day operations as the CEO. And we'll talk about a few different reasons that you might want to do that. And then I'll get into like some tactical how-tos that you can start applying right away. So let me go ahead and change my slide. Okay. So in our book, Clockwork, we talk about this idea of taking what we call our litmus test for entrepreneurs, of like taking this 4-week vacation. And that as an entrepreneur, you want to be able to remove yourself from the business for an entire 4 weeks, like completely unplugged from the business, so that we can better understand whether or not the business can effectively run without you. Because typically everything will happen in the business: marketing, sales, operations, delivery, invoicing, et cetera. Everything's going to happen within those 4 weeks typically. So it's a good litmus test of, can everything effectively run without me? But it's not actually about the vacation. Like, a lot of our readers and clients get hung up on this idea of taking a 4-week vacation, and that feels either like way too luxurious or quite impossible, or they're like, I don't even know what I would do with myself for 4 weeks on vacation. But this is kind of like best case scenario, because it's really not about the vacation. And there's a lot of other reasons that you might want to, what we would call clockwork your business, so that you can exit for 4 weeks or in perpetuity, right? Some people want to make an actual exit. They want to sell. They want to start a new business because they have a new idea, and others have health things. For me personally, again, my name is Adrienne. This is one of my babies, and she was one of the reasons that I actually clockworked our own business. But I'll give you a few examples from my own life. So this is also my husband. He actually was fully involved in our business as a full-time partner, consultant, coach, person who delivered end services to our clients. And he was diagnosed with Lyme disease back in 2017. And so we first had to clockwork him out of the day-to-day of the business. And then I, a few years later, got pregnant, and we wanted to be able to give me some time to completely step out of the day-to-day and of the business so that I could have a real maternity leave. So I actually did that first in 2020 with this baby right here. That was my first. And then in 2020, what is this year? 2023. I guess it was 2022. I took actually not just 4 weeks, but I took 13 weeks completely unplugged from the business to have my second child and do a maternity leave. So there's a ton of different reasons why you might want to be able to fully remove yourself from the business. A lot of them are related to growth. A lot of them are just related to kind of having this insurance policy, right? So clockworking your business is not about just this pie in the sky vacation or this like nice to have, but I really see it as an insurance policy for your business. Because while we think of ourselves as invincible entrepreneurs, there are so many reasons why you might be pulled out of the business. And we want to make sure that everything in the business can continue running without you. We've done this with every single type of business. So I know sometimes, especially people who are in the coaching, consulting, expert business, industry, they tend to think like, oh, there's no way I can do that. Well, we have a business where we've done that. My business partner is also someone who has done this multiple times within his business. His name is Mike Michalowicz. He's an author, speaker, coach, consultant, right? And he's actually also removed himself from the business. We have tons of clients that have done this, but we've literally done it for every business model. We have medical doctors that have done this for themselves. medical spas, lawyers, accountants. So you name it, we've done it. And it's absolutely possible for you, even if you're thinking in the back of your head, like, oh, it sounds nice, but this won't work. Like, we can navigate that and figure it out. But the first thing that we need to do is have a better understanding of our time, right? So we need to better understand our time so we can understand where our time is going, as well as the value of different types of activities. So this is a concept that we talk about in the book and also with our clients, but it's called the 4Ds. Okay, it's the 4D framework, and I'm going to go through each of these Ds. And then typically what we have our clients do is do like a 5-day time tracking, which no one enjoys doing typically. I have a few clients who are, a little wild in the head, and they continue time tracking even after the 5 days. But for the majority, like, I understand this can be challenging, but it's absolutely worth it. And it's sort of like the financials, but of your time, right? Like, we need to have a really good understanding of where your time is going at a granular level so we can understand how to improve it. And I'll talk about what those activities might be. But first, we have to understand the 4Ds so that we can look at our time and understand where it's going in relation to these different work types. So the 4Ds are the different types of work that you might be kind of traversing throughout your day, throughout your week, as an entrepreneur or as a team member, right? So this also applies to your teams. And just as important that they understand which of these Ds they are experiencing throughout the day. So the first D is what we call the doing. Okay, so the doing is when you're actually executing the task, right? So executing the task means you're writing the emails, you are doing the sales call, you are doing the coaching, you are doing the invoicing, right? Like, you're actually executing the task, right? And sometimes we can think about doing as a negative, but I want you to consider all of them as neutrals. But doing is a really valuable task or a really valuable work type for the business, right? Like, we all need to be doing to add value to the marketplace. It's just that we need to assess who is doing the doing, and making sure you're doing the right doing. So when you first start your business, you're probably doing all of the doing. And as you grow and bring on new team members, or maybe you're growing and you're reaching a point where you're at capacity, you're maxed out, and you're like, well, if I'm going to take on more clients, or if I'm going to, reach more people, then I need to hire someone because I need other people to be doing the doing. But what can happen next is we get into this deciding work type, right? Which is one that we've coined for the book. Typically not something that people are familiar with, but the deciding work type is when we're assigning a task to someone else. Okay. And when we assign a task to someone else, that means that we still own the decisions around that task or that area of responsibility or that role. And so they might be able to go and, do the activity, but then they have to come back to us and say, like, well, what should I do next? Or they might have questions about it. And they might say, do you want it done this way or that way? And then we have to make decisions, right? And deciding is actually one of the most neurologically taxing things that we can do. And so when we hire people and then they're asking us to still make all of the decisions, we feel like, oh, wow, like, great, I hired this person, but now I'm making 407 decisions all day. I've gotten none of my own work done. And I'm exhausted at the end of the day. And now I have to go start my responsibilities because I've just spent all day helping these other people, right? And so if you're in a state where you're deciding for other people, we have to move forward into the delegating work type, right? So delegating is what you might be more familiar with, but that's assigning an outcome to someone else, right? So a little bit different than assigning a task to someone else. Assigning an outcome to someone else means that they are now responsible for the decisions within that area of responsibility or within that specific activity or an entire role, for example, right? But we know people get trapped up here a lot of times, and they'll say, oh, it's just easier, like they brought these team members on and they're like, but now all I'm doing is making decisions all day. I'm not getting any of my own work done. And they're like, you know what? It's just easier if I do it all myself. And they go back to doing things themselves or just jumping in and being like, oh, they did this, but like, I'm going to go redo it because they didn't do it right. Or like, why can't they get it the way that I get it? Or why can't they do it as well as me? Or why can't they do it as fast as me? And it's because we have to practice this skill set of fully delegating something to someone else, okay? Assigning an outcome to someone else. So we want people on our team to be here, delegated to, so that we can have time to work on the things that are truly worth our time, which is typically the highest value things for the organization, right? And then we have this fourth work type, which is what we call the designing work type, which is the creating of the future of the business, right? Like this is the visionary elements. This is the strategy. This is the big picture thinking, dreaming. Like this is like, oh, wow, I'm thinking about a new revenue stream, or I have a strategy for our next marketing launch, or wow, we have these people on our team, but I wonder if they could be more valuable if so-and-so was doing this and if Joe was doing this. Like you're really looking at the full picture of the business and the future, and you are the one creating the future of the business. So typically we want you as the entrepreneurs, CEOs, leaders of the business to be spending more of your time in the designing, but most of us get really trapped in that doing and deciding, right? So we gotta move out of there, okay? So I would love for you to think about, write down, ponder over, like, what is the highest value use of your time, right? So I just gave you some hints about like the designing work type for most of us. Like this is typically the highest value use of our time, even if we don't actually spend as much time on it as we should. But you want to be thinking about like, what are the $1,000 an hour activities or $10,000 an hour activities of our business, so that we can get really clear on where we should be spending more of our time and what are some of the things that we really need to remove from our plate, right? Okay, so now I want to talk about 4 ways that you can shift your time to create more value for the business, okay? So the first thing that you can do with your time, so typically we have people, like I said, do that like 4 or 5 days of time tracking where you're going to write down when you switch tasks. I want to write down all the things that you're doing with that time, because that's what's going to give us the information on how we can start shifting that time into something more valuable. Like if you only write down, for example, on your activity sheet, like email, it's like, okay, that's fine. You spent an hour in your email, but like what types of emails? Like, was it just reading other people's, marketing newsletters, or was it responding to client emails? Was it pitches that people sent you to be, for you to be on their, in front of their communities or their network? Was it invoicing emails? Was it business development emails? Like what types of emails were those, and how much time did you spend in each, right? So being as granular and specific as possible so that we can actually do something with those things and either delegate them or remove them, or, figure out how to create a system around those pieces of the business. So once you've done that time tracking, there's these 4 things that you can then do with that time, or with those activities, right? Like the first thing you can do is you can look at those line items, you can look at those activities that you're doing throughout the week, and you can say like, maybe you could trash it. And when I say trash it, I mean, maybe we don't need to be doing this at all as a business. So a lot of times we tend to continue to do things just because we've always done them. This was like my Achilles heel when I used to work in the corporate world. My job in the corporate world was to create more efficiency, was to find cost savings and opportunities for like cost savings and improvements, right? And a lot of times I would walk around, I used to work in paper mills. I would walk around the manufacturing plant and I would be like, why do we do this way? And the response was, because we've always done it that way. And I know that when we first start our businesses, we don't want to have that mindset. But after you've been in it for a few years, 10 years, 5 years, 3 years. Like there are certain things that you're probably continuing to do just because you've always done them, right? And you don't really have any metrics or evidence that these are things we should continue doing. And so we want to encourage you to like trash some things, right? And if you're nervous about that, you can put a metric on something that maybe you're nervous about trashing, tie a metric to it, and then let's just like test trash it for a few weeks, right? And if that metric goes down or goes in the opposite direction that we're looking for, you can always bring this activity back in. But if there is no metric that we can attach to it, then it's probably a good sign that it's maybe not worth that much to the business. And if the metric doesn't change, or maybe it even improves because you're able to spend time on more valuable things, then you've freed up some of your own time and some of your own capacity and created more efficiency as a business. So trash it. What can you trash on that list? Sometimes it's meetings. Sometimes it's entire revenue streams. Like I've had clients, and myself included, like we've trashed entire revenue streams because we're like, you know what? Doing this and spending time on this is taking us away from spending more time on this, which actually is our higher profit driver, or the thing that we need to focus more on to create the scalability that we want. The second thing you can do with your activities is you can trim them. Okay, so Parkinson's law states that a task will expand or contract with the amount of time that we give it. So if you give yourself unlimited amounts of time to do things like write marketing emails or coach a client or, create webinar slides, like if you give yourself unlimited amounts of time to do those things, they will take you much more time. If you give yourself 2 hours to write a marketing email or a marketing campaign, it's going to take you much closer to 2 hours. The same thing is true for meetings, right? If you give yourself an hour, it's probably going to take an hour. If you give yourself 30 minutes, it's probably going to take closer to 30 minutes. So what on your list could you give yourself more constraints around? Like what could you actually tighten up because you're maybe just taking longer because you have it, right? So trimming activities can be an opportunity to recoup some of our time as an organization. The next thing you can do with an activity is you can transfer it, right? So when we're looking at those activities, we want to identify, thinking about, okay, we talked about like, what is the highest value use of your time? Well, if it's not that, then maybe we need to transfer it, right? Because maybe we can't trash it. Maybe we've trimmed it all we can. Maybe it still needs to be done by the business, but maybe it doesn't need to be done by you, right? And so then we want to identify that this is something that we can and should transfer, okay? So transfer means still needs to be done, but doesn't need to be done by us, right? And even if it's something that maybe you don't have a team member to currently transfer it to, I still want you to identify that on your time tracking. Like, yeah, I'm still going to transfer this. I just don't have this person yet, but it's still important for you and your mindset to understand that like, this is not the best use of your time. And actually we should put someone in place to take this over, right? Even if it means 6 to 12 months down the line, you need to be acknowledging what is not the highest value use of your time so that we can start getting the systems in place and maybe start the hiring process to get it off the plate. The last thing that you can do with those activities, you can treasure them, right? So what does that mean? It means this is the highest value use of your time. So actually we want to ramp those up, right? Like we want to increase the things that are treasure because these are the things that are typically the highest value use of your time. By you doing them, it's going to add more value and more money to the business, right? So when you're looking at your activities, you want to identify, okay, here's the current, treasured activities that I have. And then as we're starting to trash, trim, and transfer, we're freeing up some time so that hopefully we can ramp up the treasure activities so that we're creating more overall value for the business. Okay. So just a caveat, because I know that many of you probably have teams at this point, at this level. This is something that I think people understand as it relates to themselves as the entrepreneur, as the CEO. You're like, yeah, of course, I understand. I value my time. But as you're growing your team, this is important that you are not just valuing your own time, but you're doing this and you're having your team do this with their own time as well, right? Because we can't just value your time at the highest level now. We have to value their time at the highest level. because otherwise, as a team, as a unit, we're not going to be the most efficient. We're not going to have the most potential for growth if we're only valuing our own time, right? And giving only ourselves permission to trash, trim, and transfer things. So my team also time tracks every quarter. And at the end of that time tracking, they label everything on their time tracking, and they identify which things they want to trash, which things they want to trim, which things they think need to be transferred because it's not the best use of their time, and which things they are treasuring. They think that those are the highest value use of their time. Because if you're paying someone $30 an hour to do, say coaching for your team, but they're spending, 30 hours a week or 20 hours a week doing $15 an hour activities, that is not going to grow the business. That is a bottleneck to the growth of the business, right? So we have to value everyone's time on the team and understand what is the highest value use of everyone's time, and make sure we're slowly starting to move towards more of those treasured activities and reducing the amount of time that they're spending on things that should not really be on their plate or yours. So now I want to briefly cover how to transfer things off your plate without them bouncing back onto your plate. Okay. And then I'll take some questions. But when I talked about transfer things off your plate, it's we talked about deciding versus delegating. It's great, but how do I actually do that without them coming back and asking me questions, asking me, how do I do this? What do I do next? Do you want red or black, right? We have to understand why they're not making decisions currently, okay? So typically there are 3 reasons they're not making decisions in their role or in, the project area that they're personally, supposed to be responsible for. And I'm going to cover these 3, but the 3 reasons they're not making decisions is because they either don't have the information, they don't have the permissions, or they don't understand the outcome. Okay, so I'm going to talk briefly about each of these, right? So when you are delegating or transferring something to someone else, you want to make sure you're identifying, do they have the information that they need to make good decisions, right? So what resources or information will they need to accomplish this or make good decisions? If they don't have the information, it's quite impossible for them to make good decisions, which is really scary for people. It's scary for people to make decisions in your business because they don't want to get fired, right? They want that paycheck. They want to make sure that their family is taken care of. And sometimes we haven't transferred that information effectively. We're expecting them to just, make the decision, move forward. Why won't they take any initiative? Why aren't they 5 steps ahead of me? It's because maybe they have no idea where you want them to be going, or they don't have the information that potentially lives in your head. A lot of times information might live in a Google Doc or in a Google Sheet or in an Excel spreadsheet or in a client data folder, but potentially that information also lives in your head. And we have to transfer that knowledge to the people on our team so that they can do things without having to come and ask us a million questions. Okay. So what information do they need to make good decisions? The second piece is permission. What permission do they need to own this role, make decisions, or take on this responsibility or project? Sometimes we think that just delegating or handing something over means that they have permission, but to them, they're not quite sure, especially if this is something new for them that you have typically done in the past, or if you have always made the decisions in the past, they might think that you still want to make those decisions. Something else that often comes up is sometimes we think we have given people formal permission, or maybe we even have given them formal permission. They go forth and they make a decision, and then we change the decision that they made. What you have done is now revoked their permission to make this decision in the future. You have told them, you're actually not capable of making this decision. I need to make this decision, right? And so now they're going to continue to come back to you because you changed the decision. And what that typically implies to me, or sends a signal, is that they didn't have the information to make the right decision. Because you might be like, well, yeah, Adrienne, I had to change the decision because they didn't get it right. And it's well, why didn't they get it right? What information did they need? How can we transfer that information to them so that they can make better decisions moving forward? But you have to transfer that permission so that they know, hey, you're responsible for this, and you can make all the decisions within this area of responsibility. to get to this outcome, or you're responsible for this. You can make everything except for these 2 types of decisions. If there are these 2 types, still come to me because I'm not comfortable with those yet. And then last but not least is the outcome. Like, where are they going? What is the outcome criteria of this project or of this role? So how will they know when it's complete? How will they know when they've been successful? You can get like 85% of the way there with delegation and transferring things just by helping them get clear with this, right? They're going to be at least moving in the right direction, because if you can delegate an outcome, right? Now they're like, okay, I understand where I'm going, so I can make better decisions to get there. They're not always going to be the same exact decisions that you would make, which I want to offer you to release some of that control, right? I like to think about the decisions that my team members make is through the lens of, is it a decision that Run Like Clockwork would make? It needs to align with our vision. It needs to align with our values. It needs to align with the goals that we have, right? But if it's not a decision that Adrienne Dorison would make, that's okay, as long as it's in alignment with the decisions that Run Like Clockwork would make, which means we have to be clear. What is the vision of the business? What are the values of the business? Because those are tools that they can use to make better decisions within their role and remove you from a lot of the decision making that maybe they're bringing you in on right now. But where are they going? What is the outcome? Because that they will be able to move towards much more smoothly than kind of wondering like, well, I don't really know what they want from this. So it's really challenging to get there. So this is just sort of a checklist that I have our team use and our clients use just when you're delegating anything. And this is something that your team members can use too. Instead of you having to do all of this, I call it just like reverse delegation, right? They can think about, okay, Adrienne wants this delegated. She wants it off her plate. I'm going to go through and identify what information do I need, what permission do I need, and what is the outcome that I think we're moving towards. And then I just have to like check it off, be like, yep, that looks good. Or here's the information that, I need to transfer. I'm going to do that via a voice note, right? So make this as easy on yourself as possible. Okay. So most importantly, set that 4-week vacation date, because like I said, a task will expand or contract with the amount of time that you give it. And so if you have this idea of removing yourself from the business, removing yourself from the day-to-day, but it's just kind of this arbitrary pie in the sky, someday we're going to do that, if you're never going to work towards it. Where if you set an actual date, you'll be able to move towards it more effectively, start putting systems in place, start removing yourself from each of the systems and the pieces of the business that you're currently involved in with an actual end goal in mind. So I will stop sharing so that I can answer any questions that you've got or that Natalie has.
Adrienne, this was such an awesome session. So many things that you've touched on. I feel like we need to kind of come back and rewatch this session again, because there's just so many awesome nuggets. If you were to think about like one of the things that you see majority of the businesses make mistake with, or one biggest opportunity that has highest ROI, what would that be from all the things that, yes, can be improved and Run Like Clockwork? What is the one thing that maybe we can start with?
Yeah, I'm going to give you 2 just because I can't hold. One is like doing the time tracking. I know that people, they often, they try to avoid that. They try to like, I know what I'm doing with my time. And I'm like, okay, but do you know at a very specific level so that because things even like we do our time tracking once a quarter as a team, and we have our clients do it once a quarter, because even though I've like been fully removed from the business, there are still things that trickle back onto my plate or new things that come on. So do a time tracking, get a good idea of what's on your plate. And the second thing that to me is most important is really understanding your relationship with control with your team members and restraint, right? Like sometimes we micromanage and we step in because we really do want to have control over all of the decisions. But I like to remind people that control and freedom live on opposite ends of a spectrum, right? And so if you're wanting more freedom, you have to start releasing some of that control. You cannot make every single decision in the business if you want to grow and scale. You have to start putting these systems and trust in your team in place so that you can have more of that freedom and more of that growth and scalability that you might be looking for.
Makes sense. I am on your website and it looks like you are running accelerators. Tell us a little bit about that and how can people join?
Yeah, Accelerator is a year-long program to help us, or we will help you clockwork your business to get you all the way to that 4-week vacation. So if you join us, it includes access for you and your entire team. We want to work with you to help you build those systems, start removing you from the day-to-day, and build a business that can effectively run without you. So that is open all the time. And yeah, we're excited to support those of you who are ready to do something as wild as taking a 4-week vacation.
Awesome. Let's plan for that. Adrienne, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been absolutely my pleasure. The book, The Clockwork, obviously, I've read it multiple times. So everyone check out. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Everyone, we'll see you in the next session.